Hi, and welcome to today's daily response video. I am Zara Rush, creative producer for People Make It Work, and today I am joined by our associate, Sarah Drummond, and she's also program director for the Everyone Foundation. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Zara.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thank you very much. And you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Thank you for asking.
Good.
So, Sarah, a large part of your career has been with the BBC. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey with the BBC?
Yeah, it was an amazing one, actually. It started when I was about 14, 15. I was at a comprehensive school. I loved the radio, I loved communicating. And when I went to see my careers teacher, he said to me, girls like you from schools like this will never work for the BBC. And sadly, I believed him, and it took me many, many years to break out of that constraint that he put on me mentally. And I finally joined the BBC as a journalist, a reporter, having worked in newspapers, on a magazine, qualified as a journalist, but with a degree in art history. So I finally joined the BBC many, many years later. I was nearly 30 by the time I joined the BBC, and I started as a reporter and was quite lucky, really, because I was able to progress through the organisation and became a local radio editor within a few years of joining the BBC, and ran BBC Radio Newcastle and Radio York, and worked in strategy, television, launched websites, and was able to work with an absolutely amazing teams of people each time. And I think what I appreciated so much about it was the public service aspect. And in journalism, the impartiality, I really was drawn to straightforward information conveyance, if you like, and then the added showbiz nature of broadcasting on top of that. So I had an absolutely fantastic career. I really, really loved it. And when I got nearly to 50, I thought, well, the next 50 years could be a bit different to this. And so on a very happy note, I left and decided that I wanted to break out of the impartiality, be able to say some of the things that were on my mind in the world, and also to put something back into society. And when you're a journalist at the BBC, especially a working journalist at the BBC, there are certain things that you can't really do in society in case you're compromised or in case you're taking decisions about public policy. And so it allowed me to be able to become a trustee of a couple of organisations in the culture sector, which I absolutely adore, my role there. And then to use my training experience that I had with the BBC as one of its facilitators to bring that into the consultancy space. So wow, how lucky am I?
Yeah, I love hearing about the trajectory of that and what you're doing now in your associate and your consultancy role from your experience. Could you, from the seat of the experience that you've had, could you give us an insight to where your thinking is at this time, this unprecedented time, and maybe some keys to some actions that we could think about or some contemplation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, as you can imagine, follow what the BBC does as a reaction to the pandemic. And we can put aside all of the arguments about whether it's a government mouthpiece or things like that. But the way it has brought people together and used technology, and the way it has, as it is meant to do, resisted any kind of retreat into trying to work out what to do. It's just absolutely gone for it. It's looked at what society needs, you know, in terms of education, access to content on digital platforms. And so, you know, that's been on my mind of thinking about the BBC as an example of what you should do, particularly if you do have the funds. And obviously it's really, you know, in a good financial place. But that, what are you here for? Big question that I think the BBC answers has been on my mind a lot. Work that I do for the Everyone Foundation, which you mentioned, where I'm programme director. I think, you know, it's also made me realise that when it's difficult to get out there and work with people face to face, you still have to think about what your purpose is and what you're going to do, and what might you need to adapt or offer. The Everyone Foundation, our vision for the world is that everybody should be able to live to their human rights. And so that's quite a big deal, actually. And we're an organisation that is playing a part. But what that's led me to do is to look for great examples of connected humanity, and to try with what we think and what we know through other people's research, try to find examples to share with people of times when people, if you take social distancing, for example, how can you stay socially and emotionally connected while you might be bodily distanced from people, particularly as you start going back out into the world after a lockdown. So we're interested in things like that. So that's on my mind. What are we all here for? What's the purpose of our organisations, our networks of family, friends, and loved ones? Where we do or don't get income from, who should we serve in society? Who's having a really, really hard time, and what have we got among our palette of things that we could use to help them? Also, at the same time, while working out the direction of our travel.
Could you share some of your findings with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm mindful also of my role as a trustee, and I've had to, with my other trustees of two organisations where I serve, we've had to navigate a lot. Our financial models, like everyone else's, are out the window, and so. In terms of what that means to us, it's really made me think about the advice I would want to give to people in terms of embracing this existential time. I think any kind of organisation, its executive and its board, needs absolutely to bring everybody into the existential space. We're going through what I think of as, it's the biggest change management programme of your life. It still wasn't the one that you ever wanted to do or wanted to instigate. So you're going to have to do it, whether you wanted to be in change management or not. That means you need to turn it into a plus as soon as you possibly can, and you need to find some tools to help if you have any kind of difficulty navigating through that. And some of those difficulties might be just the way that you can meet as a group of people, or it might be ideas in how are you going to navigate, not just financially. It's not just a financial existential time, but it's for everything. What's the purpose of you and your organisation, the assets that you have? What are the evolving needs of the people that you serve, your audiences or your beneficiaries? How are their habits changing? So there's so much. So get into that existential time and harness people and tools to help you through it.
Yeah, let's would you be able to share with us some of the tools that you have found really useful, and that others might be able to start working through?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the magic of Zoom, here are some that we prepared earlier. So obviously, I'm going to say, for People Make It Work, and we're going to navigate through, so you'll see shortly on the screen, People Make It Work has free resources which are superb. And I'm not just saying it because I'm a consultant and an associate. This one that we're looking at now, the 5 stages through react, respond, reflect, reimagine and reshape, I found this really, really useful as a trustee, to help conversations to start with board members and exec about how we're going to approach what we want to do. And I won't spend a lot of time on this now because people can go back and look for themselves. But to be able to move through these and get as well and quickly as you can into the reimagine and reshape space much further down the document, that's really, really important. So that's one of the things that I would really recommend, Zara, that people have a look at. It's really helped my thinking process, and some approaches that we're taking. And yeah, the tools that you can work through, it does allow you that you can spend time on your own or as a group using them. So there's that one. So a great time of change management, whether you wanted your change management project like this right now or not. So there is also another resource from People Make It Work through the Change Creation Programme, and that's called the 8 Elements of Change, which Richard created. Now, this is really, really useful because it will help you move through those gears if you're feeling a bit rusty or a bit overwhelmed or not quite equipped in the way that you wanted to be. And I really like that matrix of steps that we have there that shows you it's not necessarily a linear process. It's something that you can go back and forth through the different stages. You may be an expert change manager for what you want to do, but I think this is a really useful additional tool to the 5 stages, one that I just mentioned. Thank
Mm.
you.
We can make sure that the links to these are posted in the comments for the video.
Yeah. So staying with the existential space for a moment, I think, you know, my experience and my tips, if you like, for people are, you know, just try to occupy that space in a proactive way, and don't be ashamed to be opportunistic about it. Okay, there's tragedy all around the world, and it's not just the pandemic anymore either, is it? You know, but what can you turn into an opportunity for your organisation to serve society, to serve the world, and the fallout that's going to come, positively in some cases, I hope, and negatively from others. What can you do? And I think in order to get into that space, leaders, we need to make sure that we spend enough time on ourselves, and making sure that our leadership can evolve at this time. It's a really demanding time in so many ways, you know, depending on where you are and all the other things that are going on under your roof at the moment, and all the other things that you would love to have been going on under a different roof that you might possess and can't. So you need to spend some time on your leadership. How are you going to innovate? How are you going to take everyone with you? And I don't think at all that it's a luxury for you to spend some time on yourself, your leadership. And you may, you know, it may be in very formal ways. There might be some training or some mentoring or coaching that you need, or it might be that you need to make sure that you give yourself enough time and space. Those times that you used to have that are not so easy to find anymore. And so it might be, you know, even things like being able to read a book or listen to, my favourite, obviously, as a former broadcaster, is radio. So I'm massively back into podcasts, some of them helpful and business-like, and others just for absolute pleasure, you know, when you need some moments and some brain time out, and to go into some different gears, I suppose, of thinking. So spending enough time on your leadership, it's not a luxury, it's essential. Your team needs you to do that.
Mm. And are there any resources or tools that you would key us to around delving into that space?
Well, the kind of things, I mean, in terms of reading, a couple that I'd recommend that are in a bit of in between space in a way. A book called Lost Connections, which is by a former journalist actually who was rather controversial at a certain point in his career, called Johann Hari, but where he looked at where does loneliness come from and depression, where does that come from? And did a lot of research around the world into different cultural navigations of loneliness and isolation and where they might come from, really. And I won't spoil, it's a factual book, but I won't spoil the end for you. I'll let you look that up for yourself. And then a book I've just started to read because it had so many good reviews about it, and it's absolutely the space that we're in for the Everyone Foundation and in our lives, and that's called Humankind by a Dutch journalist, but English translation for me, Humankind, and the author is Rutger Bregman. So we'll put a couple of things up for people to get the correct spellings and so on, but I find they've been really helpful. And it's, like I say, it's that in-between space between you stepping up as the leader and remembering to spend some time on that leadership self-care for yourself.
And have you got any good examples of people that or organisations at the moment that have been responding with kind of strong leadership at this time, or that have inspired you?
I think there's one that I'd like to talk about in a little while,
Yeah.
um, for a different reason as well. But inevitably, I mean, I guess the people I'm looking to who I admire are the ones who are not going to spend months in aspic working out how to try to go back to the past and navigate the past. It's people who are moving forward. And I mean, there's no magic answer. There isn't a right formula to doing that. And everything is a bit of a work in progress right now, isn't it? But I'm looking to people who inevitably occupy digital space right now. Or organisations who are thinking, okay, we have some space. Space is going to be really difficult to navigate. Some of the things that we used to like to make in our space are going to be difficult. But what else could we give the space over to in
Mm.
society?
Mm. So, do you have some approaches to kind of, you were talking about getting people on board at this time. Do you have some approaches that you can share with us around that?
Yeah, definitely. So in my career in broadcasting, I suppose if I had been very operational right now, I think I would have, in a way, been in my element, even though it's so awful. But when you're a trustee, it's slightly different space. And so I realised that I had to go and do some learning for myself about what were, I already knew them, but in this different climate, what really were my responsibilities? And I had to go for myself, first of all, to go back to the beginning of why I was a trustee and what they were. And inevitably, they are financial, aren't they? It's your name at Companies House as a director, and you don't want to be, apart from anything else, you don't want to be the person who presides over closure or decline, if at all possible. So that first step was kind of a sobering thing. And then I started to look at, okay, well, how am I going to do this well? Not just do it, but do it well. And what about finding other people who are maybe further through the journey than I am? So I found through the Association of Chairs, where I'm a member because of my role with a much smaller organisation where we only have 6 trustees, the Association of Chairs, I think I might have got, yeah, oh, thanks, Sarah. I found this really, really useful. And I became vice chair at the time of a new chair becoming chair, and we entered into their Beacon programme, became members of the association, and we've been able to go to, in the past year or so, we've been able to, before now, able to go to proper face-to-face training, if you like, where we could meet and network with other people. But they've absolutely adapted to the digital space, and it means that they have held weekly, I think they're going to fortnightly now, meetings online, seminars with experts speaking, people giving you their experience if they're a bit further forward. So you get good advice, you get cautionary tales. There's expert advice that can come to you in terms of your financial responsibilities, annual reporting, which feels really scary at this time, your annual reports, where you have to be honest about the future that you can and you can't see. So I found that was a very useful tool. And then in terms of something very, very formal, if you like. Yes, I think that's what you're going to look at next. Managing Financial Difficulties by Langley and Royce. And I found this through ACE's website, so Arts Council England, because after I'd been through that first step of, okay, my basic duty is to make sure that we survive financially before anything else. I thought, yeah, okay, how do I approach this? And this document will give you everything that you need for a framework of what to approach. And I found that really, really valuable because it gave me confidence with our board and exec for one of our organisations to apply for an emergency grant. And by understanding where we were and needed to go in this framework, we were able to make a bid that made sense to us, but I think probably also to the Arts Council, and we were successful.
Thank you so much for providing us with all of those tools to kind of help us with different areas and really help us churn our thinking, both independently, and you know, within building our leadership, but also with who we want to get on board, or with who we've got on board. Is there anything else that you'd really like to share with us today?
Yeah, I guess my third tip is get geeky. So
Love that.
I think if you think about it, I know that we're coming out of lockdown to an extent, but the pandemic isn't over. So what we've been living through recently, my take on it is that the world's been demonstrating that it can largely be at ease with an indoor digital existence. I don't mean the existence of being tied up in your house and you're climbing the walls, but in terms of being able to express yourself and link up with other people, that digital existence is something that people are becoming more at home with. And I take from that that there's also a demonstration that there will be an ease with which the new audiences that we could go looking for are there to have that relationship with us in a digital way. So, you know, if people want to link up and do a pub quiz with their friends, or have a big multi-screen family gathering, virtual wedding, you know, all those sorts of things, they will have the same level of expectation to interact with us and our assets, our products, whatever you want to call them. But, you know, the reasons why we exist in the working world and the cultural space, our audiences are going to be up for that, maybe more than we know. So if we return to the existential point that I'm making, I really think that you need to get geeky and embed that into your change management plan as soon as you can. And it has to be more than just updating your website and getting into social media. You know, what is your evolving offer, and how are you going to make that a digital offer, maybe not just from your website? So are you going to have to think about how might you get involved with virtual reality if our non-attending audiences start to be able to acquire equipment that we would normally give to them in our spaces? You know, what could we do about that? I don't have in spite of working for the BBC, I don't have the answers to those things. So if I had been an operational leader right now, I would have been looking, even in a tough financial time, at where I could find my geek skills, and whether I should be appointing somebody or bringing people out to furlough and seeing if they have the skills or could be retrained, to embed that geekery. Sorry to any geeks, don't mean to be disrespectful, but to embed that geekery right now. One of my passions in life is museums and galleries, and so, you know, when I think what would I be doing right now, I'd be thinking, okay, what does the world of VR teach us? Gaming, filmed curated talks, walkthroughs, that kind of thing, as well as starting to get back out into the environment in ways that we can, which are safe. But I think geeks, bring a geek along with you as soon as you can and embed that knowledge and innovation. So in terms of organisations that I admire, I found a couple that are really good at first glance, that shows you without us having to use the time here to watch through. But I think the We Will Walk virtual tour from Turner Contemporary of that exhibition is a really, really, well, apart from it also being very timely now, it's a really, really enjoyable, if that's the right word, satisfying and enlightening way that you can still take part in that exhibition, which obviously, like everybody around the world, had to close, and it's not possible to go see it at the moment. But I really admire the production values and the effort that they put into that. And then, you know, wanting to look a bit further around the world and look at big organisations where our perception is that money is no object. I thought what the Met in New York was doing was really interesting. You know, we're all more and more depending on our organisations, making space for the next generation to take over part of our offer. And so my heart smiled when I saw what they were doing. So you still get to take over the Met even though you can't go. And, you know, interestingly, I haven't experienced it myself, but when you look through their activities, they've got something going on every half an hour, for half an hour, in the space of teens as well. So I thought that was a really good example of the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I know it's easy for me to say because it is a really, really hard and challenging time. But I guess in the long run, the people who will be remembered and marked out will be the ones who still managed to go for it somehow, one way or another, even when the going was really, really tough.
Mm. Sarah, so much food for thought and so many examples for us to delve into. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing your knowledge and your insights with us today.
Well, and these are great as well. I've watched all of them and I've learnt too from our colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you.